Yes, hello, good morning. This is Daniel and Jennifer Fitzgerald. I'm posting another brief video. I, I wanted to inform the Russian government of the UN, along with maybe the ICC, that first of all, I called your embassy yesterday. If you get the opportunity to watch this video, I'll give you the title next week. I wanted to report that Canada's put roadblocks into our 18-year-old daughter contacting us, which is an impossibility. She'll never find us, and we'll never find her. And also, I'd like to indicate that to the Russian Federation regarding my wife and I's right to request asylum. First of all, I thank President Vladimir Putin, apparently according to a report on YouTube, offering people refuge in Russia and asylum. How that applies to my wife and I, we're not sure. Requesting asylum is not a problem. Getting to Russia is the problem, especially safely. So it's very nice of President Vladimir Putin to state this, if true. I got it on American World Report today from a fellow named James. He posted it on YouTube that President Vladimir Putin had made that statement that conservatives of the West or something will be granted refuge and asylum in Russia. He didn't say in Russia per se, but I mean, we're not entirely sure. I want to also explain regarding our children that we still don't know if they're even alive. Nothing's been proven to us that they are alive. I pointed out to you and you, the Russian government, 4 years ago. I gave you a color picture of what is apparently our son and daughter. I indicated that the boy in the photograph was not our son. He's not our son. Our son was born at 8 pounds 2 ounces. Comrades, I'm telling you, had a full head of bush hair. The baby in the photo has no hair, and the baby in the photo is quite large. Our son was born long and skinny. And I'm saying to the Russian government that that boy pictured with our daughter is not ours. We'd indicated to this adoption agency official at CAS on a telephone call that that there would have to be DNA tests regarding this boy to prove that he's our son, because this boy had no hair. I mean, you tell me. Our son's born with a full head of hair. I held him in my arms. A full head of brown hair. And the photo that I gave you people of the Russian Federation, you could see the little boy has no hair. So I'm just telling you, why would they shave this boy's head? If he's our little boy, why would they shave off all his hair? When he was born, he had a full head of bushy, thick hair. We're not lying. I mean, we remember. This is a concern. Before I get into the increased drama of this video, I'd also like to explain to the Russian Federation and hopefully the ICC regarding our case against Canada that Canada is penalizing my wife and I for trying to go public with our case. They keep penalizing us and threatening us every time we try to move on making some public display regarding our case. This is unlawful. We reported to Canada over the course of the last 18 years, to the police, in fact, around 5 different crimes against us. In all those cases, okay, the police that we either went to or came to us wanted to arrest my wife and I and ignore all the evidence. Okay, so that's another point I wish to make. I also wish to state regarding the courts here, the civil courts here in Canada, the provincial civil courts and the Supreme Court of Canada are we've indicated verbally to the Supreme Court of Canada in phone calls, emails, a number of criminal acts against us by the Government of Canada for which the Supreme Court would not grant us a first appeal. We wanted to file against Canada. I want to point this out with the Supreme Court. We wanted to file against Canada and NATO through the Supreme Court of Canada because the Trudeau government and their security were blocking all outgoing statements by us via the internet and letterhead mail and stealing the letters. And this was proven to us. We went to the Dutch government in New York. They asked us to send them the allegations. We did. After their legal department looked them over, and I called them back, they told us our case had to go to the ICC, that they'd sent communications there, and for us to send as much evidence as possible, including emails. I think I've explained this. And this was 4 years ago, and we did what they had asked us to do. We weren't getting any responses from the emails that we tried to send. The first email that I had written up for the ICC to send by email was the story of the attempted murder of our newborn child. And they never received any of that. We called them, and I spoke with the reception in the prosecutor's office. She looked up our emails. They never received a thing. The same thing happened with the High Commission of Human Rights. Exact same. We sent them emails. They never received them. I point out to the Russian Federation, we sent lawful letters to President Donald Trump at the White House. We sent letters to the British mission in New York, like snail mail. My wife sent them. Handwritten letters. We sent letters to the Secretary General of the UN. We sent letters to the ICC. We sent letters to Buckingham Palace. We were encouraged to do this by these very institutions that I've just named. These are just some of them. And none of the parties received them. Okay? So clearly, to the Russian government, excuse me if I cough, please. I still have a bit of this cold left, but it's finally starting to depart. So the point here is that Canada is guilty of everything we've accused them of by the very act of blocking any public display of our evidence, including YouTube, okay? The governments of Canada, for the last 5 years, okay, at the current one, and the opposition have completely ignored every piece of verbal statements about the acts against us, which fall under, again, Hitler's restrictions and Nuremberg laws. I'd like to state to the Russian Federation, referring to my late mother's estate, I gave you a package regarding that. And the reason why I presented that material to you, yes, my mother's estate, you're correct, legally it's an internal matter. But I gave you that information to show the Russian Federation that my wife and I have no right at all in the civil court system of Canada at all. This court actually, over my estate, with intent, ignored evidence, diaries of my brother beating my mother, threatening to kill her, stealing her cards, stealing her bank cards, and stealing her money, intimidating her, threats, treating her like he owns her. Shocking diaries, which I sent this court. And because my mother had passed away, the court should have accepted the diaries and used the information in them. They were handwritten by my mom to consider as to whether or not my brother should be executor. Needless to say, we were both appointed executors by my mom, okay, for good reason. My mom knew that he would try and steal everything. That's why she appointed me equal to my brother as executor. The will that was given to the court, he gave a will and I gave a will. Now, get this one, Russia. In his handwritten will with my mom dated 2015, I would have gotten all the property worth over $200,000. He would have gotten nothing. That's the will he actually presented to the Ontario Canada Will in Court. The will that I gave them, okay? Because there was a challenge there, believe it or not. The will I gave them was the will that my mother had drawn up with an attorney, giving both of us equal privilege as beneficiaries, and the two of us are the only beneficiaries in the will if we're living, and both of us have equal legal right as executors, okay? I gave that will to the court. Okay, if they'd accepted my brother's will, he wouldn't have gotten anything. Nothing. I would have gotten all of it. Then I want to tell you that on or about June 2022, when the case had just gotten started in the Ontario Canada Superior Court, when it just started, okay, my former lawyer, Mr. J.L.E. Maloney, who turned out to be bad, and I fired him, there was a hearing, and the judge just sided with my brother automatically and told him to fill out the application for executor. Oh, it was June 13th, 2022. Excuse me, I just remembered. And my lawyer objected to that. And the judge just sided with my brother automatically in the very earliest stages of the hearings. It was reported to the court as well by myself and my former attorney, who I fired for good reason, that my brother underhandedly was trying to sell the property, the house, when he was not even appointed as executor. He was not officially executor. This was reported to the court by my lawyer and by me. They did nothing. Not a thing. Excuse me. Now, I'd like to notify the Russian Federation. I called this court in Welland, Ontario, Canada, left repeated messages telling them about the diaries, what my mother had written in the diaries, which you got a copy of. And again, the reason for supplying this to the Russian Federation is evidence for you, leading up to the Russian government agreeing with us that we have a right to asylum in your embassy, that my wife and I have that right under international law. And as part of that, I need to be able to prove that Canada's judicial system is prejudiced against my wife and I. I need to prove this to you. And that's why I gave you that material. Now, in the end, when the court made its final decision regarding the executorship, I never received any letter from them. I never received an email from the court regarding the final decision on the executorship. Then my brother gives me $15,000 in December 2023 and another $8,000 in January. He told me that there was more coming, but that he was waiting for the government to settle my mother. He was waiting to try and settle my mother's last income tax. Okay? He never said there wasn't any left. Remember, these were advances. That's all they were. So, as time progressed, he found out he couldn't find my mother's income tax forms, previous income tax, which Revenue Canada wanted. He started contacting me and asking me, and I said, well, I might have had it here, but I think I threw it out. And then he got really mad. He started getting really mad and threatening, okay? And then after that, when I kept requesting from him the rest of my estate, about somewhere between $40,000 and $50,000, he says to me, well, wait a minute now. I emailed him and I told my brother, I said, well, I want to buy an ATV. I need the rest of the estate. Then he contacts me back and says, well, he says, I don't think there'll be that much left. And then I contact and said, excuse me? Are you telling me out of $232,000 I only get 15,000? Is that what you're trying to tell me? You told me they were advances. So anyway, finally, when I kept pushing the matter by email with him, then he gets angry, starts this routine. I want your social insurance number. And then I explained to him in a response, why do you want my social insurance number, Scott? I said, you have to pay the taxes on the estate. You're the executor. You're responsible for all the taxes. Why do you want my social insurance number? He wouldn't answer, wouldn't respond. Then finally, I kept bothering him about this by email, asking him, why do you want my social insurance number? The executor's responsible to pay the taxes to the government on the estate. And then finally he turns around nastily and says to me, the Attorney General wants your social insurance number. This is what he said. Then after that, he sends me an email telling me he doesn't want to talk to me again, and he's going to block all of my communications to him regarding my request for my money. That's what happened. And anyway, I contacted this Ontario Canada Welland Court a couple of weeks ago, leaving a message for the judges there through. And I explained to them that my brother gave me $15,000 and then requested my social insurance number. I declined, and now he refuses to give me the balance of my estate. No response from this court at all on that one. So I'm just pointing out to the Russian Federation that my wife and I have no legal rights in this country whatsoever. We have no rights whatsoever to bring up our case. There's nowhere to take our case to. That's why we wanted to appeal originally to the High Commission of Human Rights in Geneva, but we're told by the Dutch that our case had to go to the ICC. So I'd like to indicate to the Russian government that the extraterrestrial commentaries by Mr. Medvedev, and as well as the Chinese government in Beijing, the release of extraterrestrial assistance sending arms to Europe, and Mr. Medvedev's comment about extraterrestrials in the operation of Kiev, against Kursk. These are all very true. They're not to be taken too lightly in any kind of comical way, because these extraterrestrial persons exist. They are humanoid, as I have stated. They are pale white, tall balds. They don't tan, they're nocturnal. They're allergic to the sun. The sun damages them when they're out in it for any short period of time, especially if there's CMEs hitting the planet, or solar flares, or centrinos, or ultraviolet rays, as I've already pointed out a number of times. I know a lot more about this particular alien extraterrestrial race's history than anyone on Earth, and this is true. I want to explain to the Russian government that they were here thousands of years ago, during the time of the pharaohs. They got involved with the families of Pharaoh of Egypt, and inbred with them. Ramses and his magicians were quite possibly alien humanoid balds. And I'm telling you that this race of balds back thousands of years ago were the ones that pressed Ramses into murdering off the Jewish people through slavery and bondage. I want to also tell you this race of alien humanoid extraterrestrials, they absolutely hate God and Jesus Christ. Now, I had asked your government, before I get started on the reason for this video, I had asked your embassy here if you have any connections to Russian Canadian lawyers. My wife and I could still certainly use one for free. to start hammering Canada through the local civil system here for the things they've done to my wife and I. And this, of course, is still an open possibility. There are a number of possibilities where your government can help us with connections to Russian Canadians and business people that you have here. And I have asked for this in the past, but there's been no response from your government. And incidentally, regarding coming to your country, to Russia, my wife and I, this is quite a challenge. And I cannot emphasize enough that to fly there, such a long flight, such a long distance, I'm telling you, my wife and I found out that they'll blow up the plane over the Atlantic. I'm not lying to the Russian government, I'm telling you the truth. You know, we kind of had some plans in place. I thought my estate would be around $100,000, to be quite frank. And we wanted to buy a sailboat and sail through the Arctic, through Hudson's Bay, north, through the Arctic and into Siberia is what we wanted to do in summertime, provided the ice sheets have melted sufficiently enough to make the navigational journey. That was kind of our plan, because we cannot leave by plane. Like, it's just, and not, if it's an Aeroflot flight out of Toronto with Russian pilots, yes, we would get on a plane, a Russian aircraft. A passenger plane that was landing in Canada. But then I looked into that and I found out that Aeroflot is not allowed in Canada. I wouldn't be surprised if my wife and I might be part of the reason why. Or the entire reason why. But again, this is an opinion. Now I want to explain to the Russian government. I want to move into the Palestinian issue. My heart goes out to the Palestinian people, and as I told you on the phone yesterday, that I found out about a couple, a Palestinian couple who just had 2 newborns, a boy and a girl, twins, and the father was going to register them. And while he was going to register them, when he found out that both of his newborns were killed by bombings at that exact moment. Forgive me, things like this send me into tears, partially because they tried to murder our newborn, partially. I have great value for children and families, for which my government does not absolutely have any value for anyone, period. And the Canadian people don't know what their government's capable of, the darker side of their government. Our case explains the darker side of the Canadian governments and their position on my wife and I. Now, I want to explain a couple of things about what's going on. Take note of, I saw a report on YouTube by a Toronto, Ontario, Canada chief of police, which appeared on YouTube yesterday, and it was under the name of the MP, the conservative Jewish MP, Melissa Landsman. Okay? I want to explain. First of all, I'll explain it in simple terms because I want to keep this video short. I don't know how much data I have to upload it. First, we have alien extraterrestrials in the Israeli army who are at the rank of general. These are Nazis, okay? And they were the ones who are exterminating, the Palestinian race. And these balds in the Israeli army, generals, are taking orders and they are using the alien bald extraterrestrial collective in the U.S. Pentagon, okay, that are hiding and giving all the orders, while these alien extraterrestrials use humans that they're controlling as generals in uniform as well, to appear as human and make the U.S. military look unalien, and they're not under alien control when in fact they actually are. And this is complex, so I have to think while I'm talking here. The Nazis, the extraterrestrial humanoid Nazis, and their human recruits, as a collective in NATO, brought the Israeli government in with them so that they could threaten Russia and China, as Hitler did, but without threatening the Jewish race. Had they included Israel and the Jewish race in NATO states in their attempts to exterminate, then probably 90% of the nations in the UN and on the Security Councils on the Russian-Chinese side would have agreed that, in fact, it is Nazis of today repeating World War II against Russia, China, and the Jewish race. So they needed to bring Israel in. So by somehow being able to recruit this NATO collective of balds in military security, especially in the Pentagon, they placed in the Israeli army a Nazi bald general, and he was in command, overall command, with the Pentagon alien humanoid balds who were running the military actions against Russia and China. And he, with them, created this plan to exterminate the Palestinian people. Part of the plot would be that there would be an increase in anti-Semitic attacks against Jewish communities outside of Israel in NATO states. And these balds, who are also chiefs of police in Canada's civilian security, would start going around and investigating increased anti-Semitic attacks against Jews, according to the agreement that these balds made with the Israeli government, okay, regarding the extermination of the Palestinians. So, as a result of that extermination and the Israeli Prime Minister allowing that extermination, this collective of NATO control by these alien extraterrestrials would guarantee that their police chiefs in civilian service that they've built up and their recruits within the departments would see an increase in anti-Semitic attacks against Jews in NATO states as a result of the attempted Nazi extermination of the Palestinian race, and would act on increased anti-Semitic attacks against Jews, which is exactly what's happened. So here we have a situation where this alien extraterrestrial Nazi bald collective running internal civilian security in NATO states as well as NATO military. These are essentially going around in Canada, these Nazi bald police chiefs, investigating anti-Semitic attacks, the increased anti-Semitic attacks against Jews in the Jewish community because of their attempted extermination of the Palestinians. The balds attempted extermination of the Palestinians. So because of that, there's more anti-Semitic attacks against Jewish communities here, and the bald collective of police chiefs in Canada's civilian policing are investigating these increased anti-Semitic attacks because of their attempted extermination, which is continuing against the Palestinians in Gaza. That's what's going on. So I wanted to clarify that with you. Your Russian general is quite correct. I watched Patrick Lancaster yesterday. I believe he was in Kursk with Russian special forces, running around with some kind of tank targeting Ukrainian positions, and I saw the jammer on your soldiers to block the drone or Ukrainian drones from spotting your troops and killing them. I saw that, and I also. But what's important here is that your general, this Russian general, made some statements about the West. Well, he's quite correct. Whatever he called them, Nazi Satanists, which I think is the point, which is very true. And he said that Western citizens need to rise up against what he referred to, essentially, in my interpretation of his statement, was Nazi Satanists. Well, I have tried a number of times to rise up against the Nazi Satanists on Parliament Hill and their security. As the Russian Federation knows, I came to your embassy a few years ago on my bicycle with my signs, which, I had stated that the RCMP are Nazis. And I made other remarks on my signs pertaining to Nazism in Canada's government. Then there's my video, which I think I pointed out in the last video of 3 years ago, which is under Daniel Jennifer Nazi case against Canada government and police. That was 3 years ago. And it was that was the allegation I made 3 years ago. And then since then, they all saluting Hunkin, House of Commons, and the Nazi dictator Zelensky. So I was right. Been right all along. But I'm getting zero recognition. So, excuse me. My wife and I sit here alone every day for years, being ignored. We're treated like we're mentally ill. No, we're not mentally ill. We're emotionally worn out. There's a difference. And it shows at times. I freely admit that. But we're certainly not mentally ill. So that's why I'm posting this video. I just want to make sure there's nothing else I have to say before I post it. And I'll give you the title of the video, and then I'll call you next week. Hopefully the Russian government can access all my videos. The government is not allowing me to go public. This is another problem. They're violating my wife and I's lawful right to expose our case over YouTube media by limiting most of the general public from having access to them. And that's very unlawful on their part. And that's another reason why, I've asked your government yesterday, your embassy here, I asked that a letter be sent to the ICC reporting what Canada's been doing against my wife and I's legal rights to expose their Nazi Reich that they are trying to commit to by the replacement and alteration of the Constitution and Charter within law enforcement agencies across the country by appointing these extraterrestrial balls in the positions of police chiefs, and then them taking action within their departments to have their members violate the Constitution against the public. So I find it quite interesting that, before I go, I find it rather intriguing, perhaps coincidental, that I call your embassy yesterday morning, and I thank you for receiving my call and what I had stated, and then later that day, this report came out on YouTube by World News Report Today that President Vladimir Putin is offering refugee and asylum to anyone in the West. I found, is that just coincidental, or did he state that regarding my wife and I, my phone call the other day? Is he receiving my verbal statements to your embassy. I mean, I just don't know, you know. And I would like to inform the Russian government and your ministry in Moscow. I thank the Russian Foreign Ministry in Moscow and the office of Maria Zakharova for receiving my calls. My wife and I, we really thank you for that. It makes us feel a lot better when we can talk to Russia directly. You know, I apologize for criticizing your embassy and getting angry and making some accusations earlier. I don't understand the silence of your staff out in the streets. I just don't understand it. What am I missing? You know, the Russian government needs to understand that my wife and I cannot get to Russia without your help. We cannot, without Russia's direct involvement in our case. You know, I wanted to tell you also that last night I got an offer on my scooter by someone who won some money, and this person is willing to pay me $1,800 for my scooter, which I've virtually replaced everything on. It's brand new. I would only do that if my wife would agree to use the money to get a passport from Canada and a visa from the Russian Federation, and then she could fly to Moscow, and I would remain here until such a time as I could join her. My wife, I asked her about this. If she was willing to do this, then I would sell it to get her out first. But she declined and said, well, we either leave together or we don't leave at all, which is reasonable, I guess. So I wanted to inform you about that. You know, I have requested, regardless, like the government of this country, if you're against them and you're pushing for some kind of criminal investigation against them, as we have been doing, they will punish you for it. They will not look into anything. If you don't like them, they won't act lawfully in regards to other matters that don't reflect the criminal case against them by us. For example, I called Trudeau's office several times, along with Mr. Poilievre, and told both parties that my brother is criminally stealing the rest of my estate. Now, generally speaking, when this kind of thing happens, when an executor abuses the privilege of being executor, the normal practice under Canadian civil law is for the beneficiary to file in the courts. Well, I haven't done that because I know that the courts are prejudiced of both my wife and I. My wife has a case right now that's pending. She's filed a lawsuit against the Jean Coutu drug company here because on the 13th of January, and she's been there going to their store for 3 years, their drugstore here, after she sees things in the sales flyer she wants. And, you know, she went there on January 13th, as normally. She went to Shoppers Drug Mart first and picked up some cat food, cans of cat food for our felines, and then she proceeded to Jean Coutu to pick up some things in their flyer that Shoppers Drug Mart didn't have in theirs. And she went into the store, she grabbed the things in the aisles that she wanted, and she went to the cashier to cash out and leave. And when she got to the cashier, she gave the cashier her receipt from Shoppers Drug Mart, proving that the cat food she had with her was not stolen from their store. Okay, because they have the same cat food on their shelves. And the cashier looked at her receipt and said, that's fine. And she paid for her items and she went to leave, and he chased after her and stopped her as she was trying to exit, making the excuse that they needed to check the barcodes. My wife's receipt had completely already covered the fact and proven she had not shoplifted those cans of cat food that she had in her bag. the receipt already proved that, but he insisted on pulling her over again. My wife refused to cooperate with him, explaining that the receipt was, that the barcodes didn't matter because the receipt was proof enough that she had not shoplifted there. And because she had refused to cooperate, he called the security guard, who unlawfully detained my wife and forced her to go with him to the cans of cat food so he could check the barcodes. Okay. Well, as it turned out, this Canadian drugstore and all the other stores, because my wife looked into it, the barcodes mean nothing to prove shoplifting, because my wife found out all the barcodes on cat food that's distributed to stores here in Ottawa, all the barcodes are exactly the same. And of course, Jean Coutu would have known that. So what was the motive for what they did? Also, after my wife had filed a lawsuit, she was getting harassed in her email. Ever since she filed her lawsuit, a few times when she went to the courthouse to file documents, there was African Canadian men outside harassing her and coming up to her and bothering her, wouldn't leave her alone. And it just so happens that the two individuals at Jean Coutu here who did this to her were African Canadian. Okay, and so my wife had a hearing the other day on the telephone in the court, and she filed for a motion against Jean Coutu because Jean Coutu had lied in their affidavits, and Jean Coutu had not included the primary evidence against them, which was the receipt. So my wife filed a motion because she read their affidavit and found there was perjury committed in it and other statements in their affidavit that were lies. Okay, and so there was a motion. The motion was heard the other day by a judge, and they actually sent lawyers, to small claims court. It's just, that's crazy, right? And so my wife explained to the judge on the phone, I was listening to all of this, everything that happened and why their affidavit was garbage, okay? My wife, I think, wanted the judge to readdress the affidavit and force them to rewrite it, portions of it, which were lies. And she had a right to do that. And then their lawyer turns around and tells the judge that they want my wife to pay for having to show up at the hearing. So then the judge asked my wife what she is owed for her time for having to do the motion up and do the hearing on the telephone. The judge asked my wife. My wife said, "No, I don't want anything. I'm not requesting any payment for entertaining this motion." And then the judge asked their lawyer, "Well, what do you require?" And the lawyer tells the judge, "Well, according to the Small Claims Act, we can only request $100. So they requested $100 from my wife for having to appear as representing Jean Coutu. The bottom line here is Jean Coutu went to attorneys who were using threats against my wife pertaining to wanting payment from her for having to attend on behalf of Jean Coutu. Jean Coutu is using attorneys to intimidate their victims in order for the victims to drop the suit against them, is what they're doing by trying to scare the victim with huge legal costs. This was the little operation by Jean Coutu's lawyers, which didn't really work. So then at the end of it, the judge tells my wife she's going to send my wife she's not going to announce her decision, that she's going to send my wife a written decision, and then she's going to advise my wife on the next steps she has to take for the settlement hearing. And just before, when the judge said, "Okay, well, that's it now, Mrs. Fitzgerald, we're done," and they're about to hang up, when the judge said the case was over, the case is over. Just before they hang up, I heard Jean Coutu's lawyer say something to the judge. He had no right to do that, but what had happened was at the end of it, I had said to my wife, "Look, can you ask the judge? I want to say something." And I don't think the judge said to her, "Well, it's over now." And but my wife insisted, and then the judge didn't say anything. So I got on the phone and I told the judge, I said, Your Honor, I apologize for interfering, but I have to tell you that my wife has come home crying, complaining that she's been getting harassed out in the streets by African black men since she filed the lawsuit, which is very unusual. Mind you, my wife gets harassed regardless. She gets harassed all the time. So, enjoy your room. So, now the next steps are apparently a settlement hearing. Their lawyers are going to show up again, and they're going to want more money. So, anyways, in the judge's decision, she sent it to my wife, by email, and she told my wife she has to pay the $100. Like, that's incredible. The judge should have told them no. My wife's case, I want to point out to the Russian Federation here that my wife's case hinges on the fact that she was unlawfully restrained by Jean Coutu, by security in Jean Coutu, after the receipt cleared her. That's the whole point of this. My wife's case is reliant on the fact she showed a receipt and she was released by the cashier accepting the receipt and confirming she did not shoplift, and then she tries to leave the facility and then they stop her midstream and tell her they want the barcodes. My wife resists, stating that no, I'm not going to agree to that. She got upset. She was humiliated in front of the entire store and any customers in there. And she simply said, no, I'm not going to cooperate. I've already shown you the receipt and you said I could leave. And then the cashier calls security to create a provocation with my wife. And he forces her to walk down the aisles with him, and he also took her to his security room. Okay, so I'm telling the Russian Federation this because this was a deliberate setup upon my wife. And then, when my wife finally walked out the store after these events had taken place, there's an undercover police car driving by very slowly with the police officer's head staring right at my wife. So I'm going to stop now this video. I want to make it short, so I will call you. I have to think of the title here. Now, I'd also like to mention to the Russian Federation, before I go briefly, I still cannot get through to your mission in New York. My calls to them are being blocked by both the Canadian government and the American government in New York. Again, the final statements in recorded messages upon dialing, and these recorded messages answering my call, dialing your mission's phone number in New York, were that 1, the Russian Federation mission's numbers have not been allocated, and then 2, the numbers are out of service. And I protest this again to the Russian government, that this is unlawful by Canada, blocking my wife and I from reporting anything to the Russian Federation in New York. We protest that. It's quite miraculous, I must say, and I just don't understand how it is I can make the overseas calls to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Moscow and that's not being blocked as it was in the past by their access to my phone's keypad and altering the prefix numbers, spacing them further apart, and this kind of thing, so that the numbers appear incorrect, so that the dial goes to some other country, or it's just numbers that don't exist. This Canada was polling as well. It seems that activity has stopped, because I've called the Ministry of Moscow a few times and gotten through. So the bottom line, I guess, here is that my wife and I cannot do anything without Russia's direct involvement in our matter. We just can't do anything. We're living in exile, and that's the bottom line. So unless the Russian government is willing to involve themselves in this finally, really, I think we're doomed, quite frankly. There was something else I wanted to indicate, and I had it at the top of my mind here, now I've kind of forgotten, so I'll let you go on that, and I'll do another video when required. And I told you yesterday we're being threatened in the horoscopes. Yeah, we are. The police here are actually the criminals, okay? In our case, they are criminals, and their politicians in their governments are criminals. Nazi criminals, okay? We have no rights in this country. The government is blocking us, and has been blocking us all along, from publicizing everything they did for 18 years. And that in itself is unlawful, and it's a violation of our freedoms to privatize all my videos so that most of the public can't see them, I guess, unless I call certain peoples and give them the actual title. Anybody can look up Daniel Fitzgerald on YouTube. I don't even know, quite factually, I don't know if you look up my name on YouTube under the search engine Daniel Fitzgerald, I don't know what's showing up. No member state has told me what they have access to and what they don't, so I just don't know. What amazes me is considering so many of my projections and allegations of the past have come true, as I stated they would in the past, and this not being recognized by some member states of the UN is really quite shocking. Or maybe it is being recognized, but recognition shows in the appropriate international lawful actions against the perpetrators who have done all these things to us. This is how this would show, but that has not happened yet. Oh yes, again, this is what I wanted to tell you, is that, as I said, your ministry in Moscow asked me to send emails to DSO. I have twice now, and still I've received no response in my Gmail from the Russian ministry at all. There's nothing. The first time they asked me to email them was almost 2 months ago, or slightly over 2 months ago. No response. Okay, so I'm letting you know. You know, when a government asks you to, a foreign government gives you an email address and asks you to email them with that address, and in good faith you do that, and obviously my emails are blocked. So Canada's blocking my emails to the Russian Federation, which is illegal. It's illegal. So, okay, I think that's about it. So I hope Russia has a nice day, and I thank President Putin if his statement was true, according to World News Report today, because I haven't seen it anywhere else on YouTube. I thank your president very kindly for making that open gesture. Again, I stress that my wife and I cannot get to Russia without the Russian government acting against Canada, forcing Canada to allow us to leave, okay? And that those steps should be expedited, to the extent also that we're of the position that the government of Canada should simply, they have our photographs in archives regarding our old passports from 2009, which we still have. And they can make 2 new passports for my wife and I overnight without any applications at all. And they're not even willing to do that, you know, considering all the crimes that they have covered up against us. The Canadian governments have covered up, used the police to cover up every criminal act the police committed against us, and violations and threats by the police, constant warnings of not breaking the law, constant warnings and threats covertly using the MSN horoscopes as well as the Globe and Mail. And you need to look at Aries and Globe and Mail from now on. So I'm just, you know, I'm letting you know, and I better go. Listen, Prasiva, God bless President Vladimir Putin and your government. I will contact the foreign ministry again in Moscow, and you know, at some point, I don't know when, I've already called them once. It's very expensive to call Russia, and then I will ask them if they can send a letter to the ICC, and I suggest that the letter be directed also to the Chief Justice of the ICC. We're not going to have any success unless we have Russia's help. There's just no way. Canada's getting away with everything they're doing, everything they're saying. It's just an open book of them violating Canadian citizens' international legal rights, violating Canadian citizens' right to expose evidence against the government of Canada and their Nazis in security. They're just completely violating my wife and I. And it's never going to end unless the great superpower of Russia decides to get directly involved and start acting against Canada and showing support for my wife and I from your embassy in a more dramatic way, so that the government of Canada can start getting the picture that the evidence will be exposed publicly with the assistance of Russia as a superpower and Russia's status in the UN. We have waited for recognition for a long, long time, and we would really appreciate it again if the Russian government would start kicking in and essentially, telling the public that they have evidence from a couple in Canada that proves that the government are Nazis and their security. Anyway, I better go, Perceiva, and I'll post this right now on YouTube, and I'll give it a title. Actually, I better write it down, and then I'll contact you next week.